Buenos días. Buenos días a todos. Pues buenos días a este evento de
Hello, good morning. Welcome to this event on dialogues for water and deforestation in Mexico.
Presidium tenemos
As
a
part
el
of
doctor
the
Javier
panel,
Arribas,
we have Javier
doctor
Arribas
Javier Arribas Quintana.
Quintana.
Desde el septiembre del 2022,
Since
él ha sido
September
miembro de la
2022,
delegación de la Unión Europea en
he
México
is
en
a
las
European
agencias
Union delegate as a Minister for Sustainability and Energy Transitioning.
trabajando en la Comisión Europea.
Javier used to be working at the European Commission since '93. Recently, he worked as a senior expert at the General Directorate for the Environment, dealing with trade and sustainability, Pan American relations, cooperation with the UN Environmental Program, and the UN Assembly for the Environment. He's been a member of the Work and Task Force on Trade and the Environment by EUCD. He has covered issues related to trade, services, inner market, and the environment. He was a financial advisor in the European Union in Beijing from 2007 to 2012, covering market access, finance, banks, insurances, and procurement. He's also been a speaker in the University of Xi'an in China and the Business School Institute in Shanghai. In 2021, he started giving talks related to the European Green Agenda and the European Training Center. He has a bachelor's degree in politics by the University of Madrid and a master's degree by Catholic University, and he speaks English, Spanish, French, and Italian. You have the floor. Hello, and thank you for having me. First and foremost, I would like to greet my fellow colleagues in the podium for joining us today. As part of this event, this is a double workshop on forestry and water. Miguel Ángel Zerón. I'm so happy to be here in Merida. This is your home, and we've been discussing visiting Merida for a while. He is the head of the international units embedded in SEMARNAT and based in Merida. It's a pleasure to have you here. So thank you for that. Also, Sergio Aguilar Escalante, the head of coordination and climate change based in Yucatán. Good morning. And thank you for being here with us. Also, my heartwarming greetings to Mrs. Palermo. I know that you wanted to be here, but she had other engagements, so my greetings all the way there. I would like to greet Laura, my relentless colleague. She's been responsible for this program, the UN Climate Dialogue. This is a UE program working with 19 countries regarding climate change adaptation and mitigation. She's been helping us ever since I was appointed in Mexico City. I've received a lot of help in implementing the projects related to this program. My greetings to the audience. Thank you for joining us. And all future panelists regarding these two workshops. I can see we have Sergio Graf, an acquaintance I made in Guadalajara. and many other people. We know that there are people online, so greetings to you too. It's a pleasure to open this event in Merida City, a city which I've visited for maybe 3 or 4 times already. Beautiful city. And so, yeah, I'm so glad I'm able to open up these workshop sessions as part of this program, this UE program, UE Climate Dialogue program. Today, and as you know, we have two simultaneous dialogues on climate change and forestry reducing action, and another one on climate change adaptation on water. It's no coincidence that today we get to talk about forests and water. As you may know, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, will be the International Day on Forest and then the International Day on Water. So this is the week on forest and water. So it's only natural we can dedicate these two workshops to these key topics. Yucatán is a key hub because these two programs are geographically placed in the state of Yucatán, which hosts these two projects on forest and water. I would like to highlight the fact that these two subject matters are somewhat concerning for Mexico and the European Union alike. As we fight climate change and also as we cooperate internationally. This is why, under latent climate change risk, the European Union knows that we need to have mutually compelling action to face degrading forest ecosystems and altered water cycles, whether in surplus or otherwise. We have a publication, the European Climate Risk Assessment, which tells us that worldwide 2023 was the hottest, record-breaking year with 1.48 Celsius above pre-industrial levels. As I was reading my emails this morning, I saw that the National Oceanic Atmospheric Agency based in the US just released the fact that February was the hottest consecutive month in history, in recorded history. So things don't look good. The European Union Climate Risk Assessment points us to the fact that Europe is the fastest warming continent facing worsening events. Climate change related events will surpass 2.5 million GDP in most European countries. This is why I would like to highlight the fact that no country, no region or continent is safe from climate change effects. And so we need to urgently start adapting. A couple of words on the two projects at hand as part of the program. Water and forests are intertwined, very clearly intertwined. Just as drafts contribute to forest loss, deforestation, forest logging alter water cycles, thus amplifying disasters such as flooding, landslides, and droughts. It is in our hands to change these vicious circles into more of virtuous ones. This is why this task we have at hand today as part of these two workshops are key. As per CONAFOR in Mexico, forest lands gets 188 carbon dioxide emissions being captured. Forests are carbon hubs, which play a key role in managing carbon. And on top of this, my understanding is Mexico have 12 million people inhabiting these forest ecosystems, enriching their communities. CONAFOR also reminds us of a piece of information that's quite concerning. In the last 20 years, over 200,000 hectares a year have been lost. This figure, so you get an idea, means that half an hectare will be one soccer field, so there will be 400,000 soccer fields lost worth of forest being lost in Mexico. Mexico is no exception to this. We have lost in the last 30 years 400 million hectares around the world in the last 30 years. This equals 800 million soccer fields. This is tantamount to the whole UE surface, 400 million square kilometers in the UE, which is basically 400 million hectares. This is something we've continuously been doing in the last 30 years. The issue is that the deforestation and desertification processes won't get better. So this is why we need to take this affair seriously, so that we can try and revert this process. The European Union isn't safe from accountability throughout this process. The European Union, via trade, has contributed to deforesting this part of the planet because we consume products such as soja, cocoa, coffee, beef, and so on, all of which are contributing importantly to deforestation elsewhere in the world. And so this is why what we need to do is, of course, acknowledging this responsibility and act accordingly. This is why we are contributing concrete solutions. One of the ways in which we are trying to stop deforestation and deforestation degradation is through the deforestation-free related products. On this European policy, we're trying to find the most relevant challenges faced by operators and traders in compliance in terms of management, traceability, risk management, and identification across the 7 regulated products supply chain, which we'll go over more. According to the World Economic Forum, 5 of the 10 main risks that the world population will face in 10 years will be related to the environment, and all of them are somewhat related with scarcity or surplus in water. Data by CONAGUA on February 2024 tells us that Mexico has 50% of its territory suffering from some degree of drought. Some of the states in Mexico are experiencing extreme situations of drought, such as Sinaloa, Querétaro, Hidalgo, Veracruz, Nuevo León, Sonora, Baja, Tabasco, the Yucatán Peninsula, the Mexican Valley, and others face important water shortages, which I have experienced also in Mexico City. They tell us that the Cutzamala reserves are very low. The water workshop will tackle action on climate change adaptation in the long and short run, and having non-traditional agents being compliant in the water sector. Also, we are developing 4 case studies on this water project. We're going to delve into very briefly, though, because we don't have many resources available. We're going to, I'm sorry, hopefully you got to hear me. Otherwise, I'll start from the top. Yeah, of course I can get to hear me better. Okay, so we're going to go into 4 basins as part of this water-related project. The basin in the Pánuco River in the border with Tamaulipas and Veracruz, the Yaqui Basin in Sonora, the Cutzamala Basin in the Mexican Valley, and the Yucatán waterway, because we don't have resources to go about studying the whole country. So we thought these 4 basins were quite depicting of the challenges and opportunities in water in Mexico. So hopefully, this study we are about to conduct will help us jump to conclusions and recommendations which could be replicable across Mexico. We'll be working on 3 sustainable development goals as the G6, 12 on ecosystems and territories, and the 13th one on climate change. But all of them are actually intertwined with everything else. And so it's no chance that on March 22nd, International Water Day, from 3 days from now, we'll tackle water for peace, because peace encompasses all SDGs. And so, yeah, I can see that I look forward to today's work from the UE delegation and my colleagues in Brussels. We are very pleased to be working in Mexico, with Mexico, on these 2 subject matters. So hopefully by the end of this process, we are going to get to see useful outcomes with concrete recommendations to aid governors, the private sector, citizens, and everyone else to transition to sustainable development, which we all yearn for and which we are accountable for, so that our future and the future of generations to come won't be compromised. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Voy a presentar al señor Sergio Aguilar.
Thank you. Now, Sergio Aguilar Escalante, already introduced by Mr. Javier Arribas. He is the head of Planning and Climate Change at the Yucatán Sustainable Development Agency. You have the floor, sir.
Muy buenos días. Pues en nombre de la maestra Diana, titular de la Secretaría, les mando un cordial saludo.
On behalf of the head of the minister, she sends her greetings. I greet Laura and my other colleagues with whom we've liaised for this event. I am very pleased to represent the state of Yucatán, to see familiar faces with whom we've worked in other projects. So I think this workshop will be very fruitful. The Yucatán state has tackled key topics across SDGs on climate action. Climate policy is included within the development state plan, for the first time in history as a cross-cutting component, which is the environment, SDG 4, with which our framework has been built. Regarding climate, we didn't have something on climate change, which was released in 2021, tackling forests and water. We have other rights for existing ministries, and other ministries are thereby added to address this topic, including, but not limited to, CERESOL and gender equality. So generally speaking, we've been tackling these two subjects, which are highly relevant. On forest, according to the last greenhouse gas inventory, we're standing at 15 million tons worth of equivalent CO2. However, our emissions stand at 18, so we have a 3 million deficit to mitigate for, which is even more so important because as a state, we've committed to Race to Zero project as subscribed by our governor. So not only are we dealing with today's deficit, but our growth should achieve emission reduction and increased absorption for recovering ecosystems and to maintain the existing ones. So I can say the reforestation rate, according to CONAFOR data, have been dropping, but we are still above 13,000 hectares a year ratio. So there is a lot to do here. The preserved area in the south is the last frontier in Quintana Roo and Campeche, and so this is highly relevant in the peninsula. And this is a replenishment area for the aquifer. What have been working on recently with many partners, well, fostering sustainable rural development in the south. We are addressing deforestation, cattle, agriculture, and encouraging traditional growth and thus reducing impacts on the environment. We've also updated the deforestation, reduction, degradation, mitigation strategy to further address these subject matters. We are ultimately looking at reducing deforestation rates and maximizing preservation in the state. And so we know that the Peninsula Basin is one of the most important basins in the peninsula, connecting two states. Generally speaking, they say we don't have a problem on water availability and replenishment. It might be so. However, we have a latent risk of vulnerability for pollution of this water. Our kind of soil, as regards human activity, involve potentially pollution where waters for human consumption are not without appropriate treatment. And so this is something we've been working on too. Last year, we created the water state strategy with a lot of the members by the academia and government agencies have participated in. Three components were identified: governance, engagement, and information access. So we know that we've been working on creating some data presentation and availability platforms available to the general public, but this is something that we find as a challenge regarding integrating monitoring agents and information holders, so all of this could be available and visible for consultation for researchers, associations, and the general population. We've been working on citizen monitoring as people engage. We have done cleaning campaigns in cenotes and sinkholes which are used for recreational purposes. And so these ecosystems have been recovered together with people and municipalities. We know there are a lot of things to be done across both fronts, forest and water management and water care, but we know that these partners and engagements by everyone here in attendance, we will be able to accomplish this in the short run because action needed to happen yesterday. And something else which lingered in my mind ever since we started working with climate change in terms of adaptation. Well, I have a video for you because we have information that's enough, and so we should adapt. But this step into action has been something we've been struggling with ever since 2015, almost 10 years ago, in order to settle this information. Adaptation action needs to continue so that we get to avoid temperature increases going beyond the point of no return, 1.5 Celsius, so that we get to maintain our ecosystems as healthy as possible for a better future. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al director Sergio Aguilar.
Thank you, Sergio. We also have Miguel Ángel Zerón. He is the head of international affairs embedded in SEMARNAT. He is responsible for public policy making and impact studies. You have the floor, sir.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días a todas y a todos. Estimado Javier, Sergio, Laura y amigos.
Hello, everyone, dear friends, colleagues, and members of the community. It's a pleasure to host you in Yucatán. SEMARNAT is located in this region, and this is no chance for the Ministry of the Environment to be based in this region because we have challenges and positive aspects on biodiversity in Mexico. The relations we've built with the European Union to address the environment have been key because we've understood that ecosystems cannot be understood without people. Any environmental benefit or issue component has a social component that's highly relevant. Forests or water or sinkholes cannot be talked about without thinking of their communities who profit from this, and so they've managed these natural resources.
Sometimes we lose the focus on the concentration on how to make the people participate in decision making, to learn horizontally, and how to protect and conserve those ecosystems. So the environmental crises are undeniable. Pollution, climate change, the loss of diversity, degradation of lands, and sometimes we forget how all these speeches as zero deforestation can be translated and can be implemented in the territory. So being here in Yucatan, and I really hope that this dialogue can be done in a community, in a smaller city that can use those resources, will be a great and interesting exercise. The European Union is also, and we need to say this very clearly, one of the most important commercial partners of our country. The environmental cooperation comes with a business challenge, and that relation for us from the environmental sector is a very important concept, the concept of balance. We cannot privilege the business development without paying attention to the challenges and the guidelines to make decisions to protect and enhance the development and improvement of our community. So, in that sense, as mankind of humanity, and this is very pessimistic data that we have been given by Javier, Sergio, and some other people, and now very clearly you can find this in the media. they have to consider that symbiotic relation between the commerce and the protection of the environment. We need to think of this. We have need to change our mindset, and we need to think on how to protect the environment. We need to conserve and produce by conserving. We cannot separate these two concepts. This is relevant because these are the communities who take advantage of those resources. And by just a piece of information, 80% of the biodiversity in good condition is managed and protected by communities, especially indigenous communities. So this gives us an idea on how we can establish this relation and balanced relation for development without impacting our territories. Now, when it comes to deforestation, which is the dialogue that we need to perform today, Javier already mentioned that 12 million people receive benefit from this ecosystem. And when we talk about the forest, it's not only the forest; there are also other ecosystems. The 70% of our territory is forest territories. It's not a minor issue, and we are very thankful to discuss these topics. And the agenda, well, is very rich. The topics that will be discussed today are really important, and also showing how from the environmental sector we have been able to lower this tendency to deforest with a very specific strategy that will be shared by one of our colleagues. This is the strategy against deforestation and the way in which we have made some local strategies, especially with Yucatan State. We have one of those ways to protect, how to protect the basins and the aquifers from Yucatan. And we have made a covenant with aim to regulate and improve the relation of the pig farms that have a great environmental impact, and that no doubt these are linking topic. I want to close and wrap up by saying that in order to make decisions and to move on, it's necessary to receive the participation from everybody, the academia, the NGOs, local governments, municipalities, and communities. If we don't make them part of this effort, we won't be able to affect and change the phenomena and comply with the commitments that we have with our own country, with other countries, and of course, guaranteeing the balance of ecosystems and looking to the future, the dialogues that will be conducted today. I understand that we are also broadcasting this conference in order to pass it over many other people, pass it on to many other people, and this will be quite relevant, and decisions that can be made will be important too. So thank you so much from the environmental sector. We will continue participating with these conversations and especially protecting this sustainability that our communities and territories deserve. Thank you so much. Thank you. Finally, in our panel, it is my pleasure to introduce Laura Vallejo Chavez. Laura is the correspondent for the dialogues of climate change from the European Union. It's also counselor for the prevention of violence, and she has worked for UMA and CCMUC, for USAID, GTZ, and FTD, as well as for the University of San Diego, global organizations, and private sectors. Laura has a degree in international relations from Universidad Valle de Mexico, a master for the cooperation of the sustainable development from the Mora Institute, credentials from public leadership. She also was in Oxford University and has developed studies on the ecosystems and environmental economy, among others. Thank you, Magda. Thank you. of course, Sergio, for having us. Thank you, Miguel Ángel. Thank you, Javier. I also want to say thank you to Javier because from the very beginning, and when we started designing these projects, we wanted to concentrate our attention to this adaptation. We know that the people here are all experts and there is important depth in adaptation. And just to reminding what Miguel Angel said, adaptation is linked to communities, to people. So I think that this is the right moment to turn and see it. It's also necessary that the other way didn't work out. So this is the moment that we need to profit. And of course, I need to also say thank you to Javier because he has always promoted these kind of projects that are very relevant. They were designed last year, of course, but we are seeing a scarcity of water. It's not comparable because the Conagua information is given every 2 weeks. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the people who are watching this by Zoom, the people who are in Europe getting connected from other countries, my colleagues from other countries, and of course, to all the community here. I love to see young faces. I really trust the young people. I think that you are going to do it better than us. I don't want to take more time. Can I see my presentation, please? Now I'm going to briefly explain about the dialogues for the climate change. We have two main projects. I won't stop too much into them because that's the purpose of the day. I will explain to you the agenda so that we can also explain because you received invitations from forest and water areas. So I will try to explain and to prevent confusion. Everybody's invited and we will share from the European Union all the results and the results from all projects. Next slide, please. About the goals of the climate dialogue from the European Union or EUCDs. There are four of them, and one of them is to support the bilateral relations of the European Union with external associates related to climate policies and to promote implementation of the Paris Agreement. Next one is to promote climate policies and investments in economies outside of the European Union, exchange practices for policies and experiences related to economic activities related to climatic action, and to strengthen the commerce, the investment, and bilateral innovation. We implement this in 19 countries. We see here 20, but because of political reasons, Ukraine is not participating. Then our main stakeholders, we have here the representation from the federal government, state powers, organizations, civil organization groups, private sector, of course, the academy, and I just want to add as well to one very important stakeholder, which is or could be an ally for not only spreading the information but also sharing to in other spaces, which and they are the media, and of course the members from the European Union. Javier and I, we have had important approaches for possible alliances in the framework of this project. Now I'm going to talk about the project of forest. Where does it come from? Well, in the European Union, thanks to the policies and guidelines, and you can get this information, of course. And the last one is the guidelines of the European Union for deforestation-free products called EUDR, which is the reason why we are here. For me, it seems very important to mention the strategy on biodiversity for 2030, and thanks to that, we can connect the comments done by Javier about water and about forest. These are two topics that are very close and very related. We cannot think of them separately. And now, from the context in Mexico, of course, this is done to support the unconditional goal of this NDC, also to the national strategy called also RED, and also supports to the SEMARNAT Secretary and SADER. The general goal, and when we think of in a general way, would be supporting the bilateral commitment between Mexico and the European Union to guarantee the effective implementation of the UDR on deforestation-free supply chains that can contribute to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and the loss of biodiversity, increase resilience, and to help the and to assure the means of life for those people that depend on the forest ecosystem, including the indigenous communities and local communities. In this case, I would like to consider an invitation done by Miguel Ángel to eventually consider and to have a similar exercise in a smaller community. So we will think of this. This is going to be a pending task. If it's not possible because of logistic issues, at least you should have representations and representatives from communities, from smaller communities. That's part of the goal. And in this project, we have already discussed. We will discuss this in a few minutes. We had already a first dialogue 3 weeks ago in Mexico City. We received 30 people, 26 virtual attendance and participation from all the sectors. Great participation from the public sector. And of course, organizations from the civil society and the academy. What is our expectation at the end? First, 3 dialogues that, of course, we don't want them to be only workshops or an excuse to socialize. This dialogue is a reason or an excuse to identify those points of view that we don't know, because oftentimes we are living kind of in a trench and we cannot move too much because we are overwhelmed by some other factors. It's important that relation and the speech and the knowledge that are generated from it. So this is our first goal, our first product, these 3 dialogues. After that, and this is an instrument that we really hope to be useful for you all, for us, for all the attendants and all the sectors from the 3 levels, which is an analysis of the possible implication of the regulations of the European Union, considering the deforestation-free supply chains that affect the restoration of the forest between Mexico and the European Union. So basically, those are the these parts of the guideline that we mentioned, and also to share an instrument which is a summary of methods, tools, and good practices for the management, conservation, and forest restoration. We also had this experience, and of course, this was planned beforehand, but we want this summary to be as rich as possible, taking into consideration the experiences and the concerns you have about this instrument on the guidelines. And of course, please, all the ideas are totally welcome. I have a team of people, representatives, and in just a second, I will ask them to be here to join us. But Gloria is one of the participants. Gloria is widely open to receive all your comments. Sometimes it's not possible to discuss all of them in the panel because we have a lot to discuss and a lot to say. But the goal is to keep this dialogue, and you should know that this is an open window for providing also the suppliers and Javier and I, and of course considering all the implications of this guideline. And after that, we have state policies on adaptation and resilience. I come from adaptation, and sorry if I am showing this with more enthusiasm, but I'm part of that. That's part of my work. That's one of the topics that I feel more passionate about. So in this case, the context is to maintain the European Union from since the year 2000 has a law or a frame law about waters, and it was updated in the plans by the management of hydrographic basins. So that's why we insist, Javier and the people from Brussels, we said that this study should be done from the perspective of the basins. And this approach was pretty technical and pretty wise in order to understand the problems to adapt. And then, considering the Green Pact in Europe, we have the strategy of adaptation from the European Union from that dates back from 2021, and the recent assessment mentioned by Javier, which dates back on 2024. And the context in Mexico, the NDC has this beautiful five axes or five points. Is not only because it's pretty inclusive in the topics mentioned, but also has a specific point on the management of water. And in this case, I would like to focus my attention on that line to get actions for the use of water with an insight of climate change. So this is from the perspective of Mexico, the ACM and communication adaptation. It's under preparation. And also in the PEC is mentioned that there's the association of the state and the communities to deal with the climate change, especially in those municipalities and communities identified as highly vulnerable and marginalized. And in this sense, the general goal is to develop a model for subnational policies and recommendations to adapt and reduce the risk and impacts of the climate change, and to improve the resiliency, concentrating our attention in the water sector to the short, medium, and long term, considering the guidelines of solutions based in nature, adaptation based in community, and adaptation based in ecosystems. In here, we can see different actions and developed products. We are they are under they are being done. We have 4 case studies. We chose these cases along with other colleagues. We have the Yaqui River in Sonora, the low basin from the Pánuco River. This is pretty ambitious. The Cuchamala system, another ambitious topic, and the aquifer in the peninsula of Yucatan. What is our expectation of this project? With this project, we have 2 dialogues on obstacles and opportunities, then another one to discuss this model for subnational policies. We will have these 4 case studies, and we will also have a model document of a frame of policies that we want to share with all the sectors, with all the levels, in order to have their own comments or the feedback, and this should be an instrument to the states to adapt their water resources. So that's it.